Today, car buyers are shopping online, in store, and everything in between. Retail 360, Cox Automotive's suite of connected end-to-end tools, empowers your dealership to deliver the seamless experience consumers want. Reach out to your rep to learn more.
Welcome to Daily Drive for Tuesday, August 12th, 2025. I'm Kellen Walker in Las Vegas. Today on the show, Ford bets big on a mid-size EV pickup and a new assembly process. The Trump administration restarts federal EV charger funding, and GM eyes a return to driverless cars. Plus, Unifor President Lana Payne talks about the high stakes for the North American auto industry as the U.S. and Canada negotiate a new trade landscape.
You either play the cards you have or you fold, and I don't think anyone in Canada wants to be folding right now.
Let's run through all the news you need to know to keep up in the auto industry. Ford plans to start selling a mid-size electric pickup for about $30,000 in 2027, and it says the truck can be built up to 40% faster than vehicles today. The new model will use an EV platform that executives say is as revolutionary as the product itself, and will help compete with low-cost Chinese competitors. On Monday, the automaker revealed its Ford Universal EV platform that's expected to underpin as many as 8 models. It will start with a pickup that will be closer in size to a Maverick than a Ranger. The Trump administration is restarting federal funds to build EV chargers. That's after a federal court blocked an earlier move to freeze the program. The U.S. Department of Transportation released new guidance Monday on how states can use the funds. It says it will streamline applications and cut red tape to access the program's $5 billion in funding for charging infrastructure. And General Motors is reportedly looking to renew its push for self-driving vehicles. That's according to people familiar with the matter who spoke with Bloomberg News. GM retreated from the space earlier this year when it absorbed its now defunct Cruise robotaxi unit. This time around, sources say the project will be focused on autonomous cars for personal use rather than a robotaxi service. And those are today's headlines. You can find more details on all those stories at autonews.com. Joining me now to talk more about Ford's new EV pickup and assembly process is Michael Martinez, who covers Ford for us at Automotive News. Mike, once again, welcome back to Daily Drive.
Thanks for having me.
So, Mike, what do we know about the product and how this assembly process will be different?
Well, that's just it, Kel. At this point, it seems like the process is more interesting, more important even than the product itself. Now, Ford's saying they have a new way to manufacture cars, that they're tearing up the idea of the traditional assembly line and they're moving to what they call an assembly tree process, which essentially consists of 3 sub-assemblies that will be put together at the same time and then joined together at the end of the process. Now, if you remember, Tesla's talked about this idea. Some of the Chinese competitors have talked about this idea of an unboxed manufacturing process where you don't have workers reaching through doors to snap pieces in on a dashboard or going under the body or reaching over fenders. Instead, these sub-assemblies are all sort of laid out in front of them, easy to assemble. You put together, move it along, and snap it together at the end, basically. It utilizes what Tesla's called gigacastings, which are large pieces of the car, essentially. Ford's calling them unicastings, but the bottom line is that Ford thinks this will lead to a faster manufacturing process and a cheaper manufacturing process.
And Mike, do you think this faster and cheaper manufacturing process will help Ford with their quality issues?
That's what they say, because basically some of the time you're saving on putting the vehicle together can be reused to add in extra quality checks. And the fact that they're going to have a whole lot fewer parts means there's a whole lot fewer chances for things to go wrong. So they hope quality will improve as well.
And how much is on the line for Ford and CEO Jim Farley to make this a success?
A lot's on the line. You know, if you look at their recent history with electric vehicles, yes, they became number 2 in US sales to Tesla pretty quickly behind the Mustang Mach-E and the F-150 Lightning. But those products still to this day are not profitable. Ford is losing a whole lot of money on them. They lost a whole lot of money canceling some 3-row EV crossovers that we never got to see. And now they're pivoting this direction for smaller, more affordable products. So if they want to be profitable on EVs and if they want to continue to gain share in sales, this truck and this new platform better come through.
Awesome, Mike. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Cal.
Coming up, we'll hear from Unifor President Lana Payne about the view from Canada of trade negotiations with the U.S. and what's at stake for auto workers. That's next on Daily Drive.
Today's consumers are using multiple channels to buy cars, online, in-store, and everything in between. And dealerships need to deliver a consistent, connected car buying experience that keeps shoppers and dealers in sync across every channel and every stage of the purchase process. Retail 360, Cox Automotive's suite of connected end-to-end tools empowers your dealership to deliver the seamless experience consumers want. With industry-leading solutions and consumer sites, Cox Automotive connects and enables shopping and buying across all channels. Consider a typical buying process. A consumer might shop for cars on AutoTrader or on a dealership's dealer.com website. At the same time, they might research the value of their trade-in on Kelley Blue Book. Whatever they're doing, your sales team will see that they're actively in market through VIN solutions. When they arrive in your showroom, you can use DealerTrack to build a deal and secure financing options. vAuto will help you price their trade-in correctly, and after they drive off the lot, you can use Xtime to keep them coming back as a lifelong service customer. Along the way, you'll get the industry's most powerful predictive insights that aggregate data from 7 out of 10 in-market shoppers and AI-led automation that puts repetitive tasks on cruise control. Reach out to your Cox Automotive rep today to learn how you can meet today's high consumer expectations to deliver a more satisfying car buying experience with Retail 360.
Welcome back to Daily Drive. I'm Kellen Walker. The head of the union that represents Canadian auto workers says times are scary for her members. Unifor President Lana Payne says the Canadian government's refusal last month to go along with a trade deal with the U.S. would have been a devastating outcome for the industry. Payne spoke with David Kennedy of our sibling publication, Automotive News Canada, about the trade tensions and what comes next. They spoke on the latest episode of the Automotive News Canada podcast. Here's a piece of that conversation.
Can you just start by giving me your current take on the tariff situation?
I think in the context of the kind of it's just like ongoing, and it's one more thing. And while the impact on auto is not there, the challenge is we still have the impact on auto.
Yeah.
And I think for us, we were in a position where we were saying as a union, and others were saying this too, thankfully, that we're better off working to get a better deal or a good deal than rushing to get a bad deal. So no deal in this moment. And I say that because you're starting to see pressure points in the U.S. bubble up now. If you look at the hiring numbers that were out this morning, they're plummeting. If you look at the impact of aluminum prices, which are starting to grow, all sorts of things because of the tariffs that the U.S. has actually put on us having an impact. That's not to say we're not feeling pain right now, because we are, particularly in the auto sector. And all of our facilities are feeling it in some form or another, whether it's reduced production, about the cancellation of shifts, and of course the continued pause in retool at Stellantis. So these are very, very scary times. And I know it's a leap of faith often to say that we have to get to the right negotiating moment with the right leverage. But honestly, a deal on today that would have included permanent or normalization of tariffs on the auto industry would have been devastating for workers in Canada.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, obviously, I know that it's been an issue for a long time for auto. There's been a buildup over the past few months as things have kind of dragged on here. Do you feel like you're in a
Yes.
worse position than you were a week ago, or do you feel maybe now that we've got this out of the way, we can start to look ahead?
Yeah, I mean, I have probably a better optimistic approach to look at this than most do at this moment, but that's because I do believe that the deals that the U.S. signed with Japan and the EU have pushed the U.S. automakers to have to say, hang on here. This is putting us in a non-competitive disadvantage right now.
Right.
And it's really unfair for all these reasons. So they are having to make a different case now to the White House and to trade officials in the U.S. about why these deals are not good for automakers who employ hundreds of thousands of people in the U.S. Directly in auto assembly or in the supply chain. And how this can reopen up the important dialogue around how integrated the North American supply chain is. And so I think it's important that we use those deals and the tariffs that were put in place there to actually show why Canada is different. And we already have a trade agreement with the US. Japan and the EU did not.
Yeah.
We have an integrated system. We build cars together. That is certainly not the case of Japan and the European Union. They build very little in the U.S. So I think this actually opens up an opportunity to have a different conversation. I think what's happening with aluminum and the continued pressure you're going to get from that, the pressure that it has on the auto industry. I know you probably have seen Ford Motor Company speaking out about this. They are obviously use a lot of aluminum in there as an input. But the other automakers do as well, and steel too. And I think the other thing that's creating pressure right now are the billions of dollars that the automakers have lost as a result of these tariffs. Yeah. And, this is going to have an impact in a number of ways. And sometimes when you're at a negotiating table, we use this expression, David, you let the cake bake. And there's a lot of baking happening right now. And when I say that, I mean a lot of heat is being applied. And when you see this kind of loss, it's bad for us in Canada, but it's also bad for the U.S. and bad from the perspective that these billions that are being chewed up in tariffs are going to have to come from somewhere. Yeah. These automakers are going to put pressure on somewhere to recoup that, and for sure it means. They are looking at how they do tariff mitigation plans. That's one thing that's dangerous for Canada. But they also have to look at what they're doing in the U.S. And if prices go up, which we know that they will, and this has been projected by all kinds of folks that you talk to all the time, as those prices get baked in, what you end up with is potentially a reduction in demand. And a reduction in demand means a reduction in production. And a reduction in production means a reduction in jobs. And that's where this is headed. And it's also headed to a bargaining table. And mark my words, always in the end, it will be workers who will be asked to pay the price of these tariffs in some form or another. And auto workers at bargaining tables in Canada and in the United States will be brought, pressure will be brought on them to have to, pay up in some way or another here. And that'll be something that our union will need to resist. And of course, the UAW will need to resist. Right. The other thing that is going to become very obvious to people is, profit sharing checks for auto workers in the US are about to get a lot smaller. And they're going to get smaller because of tariffs. So there are a lot of things going into this melting pot that are going to have all kinds of reactions and responses in the U.S. That is going to bring pressure to bear. And sometimes when you're bargaining to get the best deal, you have to allow the pressure points to really cause and be real for people. And I think we're starting to see that now.
Yeah. And, obviously the tariffs are applied to Canada at this point. Mexico's got the tariffs that were applied before and a 90-day reprieve from anything escalating. Is this? Do you simply see this heading back to USMCA negotiations at this point with the three countries, or are we going to get something ahead of that? Those negotiations next year?
Yeah, I think this is very hard to predict. I do believe that there will be a lot of pressure to try and get some kind of interim arrangement that lifts the tariffs, and I think that needs to be our goal. Lifts the tariffs on auto, steel, and aluminum before we get to that bargaining table. It's very difficult and will be difficult if we're on our back foot, and that is the first thing at a table is you got to get the tariffs removed or work on whatever it is you need to do, provide additional carrots here in order to get them removed. I think Canada has done goodwill negotiations. We have offered up a lot in terms of trying to negotiate in a good place. And now we may have to look at other things. And I've been saying this today, that we have to take stock, we have to reassess, and we have to consider, if now is the time where we increase our leverage and retaliate in other ways. And that's something that has to be considered. If not, I would say to you, we can't go through this without fighting for these jobs and for these industries. And what I mean by that is auto workers and steel workers and aluminum workers and forestry workers cannot pay the price of this trade war. That is unacceptable to me. And I believe they expect their government to fight for them. And we will be pushing to make sure that we do that. Right. And if that means we have to look at the kinds of things that Premier Ford is talking about in terms of increasing retaliation, if it means we have to stockpile critical minerals, we have leverage that we can look at, and we have pressure points that we can add to what we're already doing. And I hope it doesn't come to that. But honestly, we have to save these workers and their jobs, and that means doing hard things.
Yeah. And does it, build a little confidence from where you sit that, the Canadian government at this point was, kind of given this deadline, didn't back down, they didn't take that bad deal that you mentioned. Do you feel more confident that, we may be able to stare this down a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, I think the Prime Minister has been hearing from a lot of us about where we were. It wasn't just me in the auto sector. Sure. Many of the auto companies were, basically saying the same thing, probably behind closed doors. But, auto parts companies and others were saying, look, we have to be careful here. A normalization of tariffs in the industry, it will be very, very challenging for the industry to survive in that kind of an environment. I've heard from some who have placed, the burden on just their Canadian production at $1 billion a year if they even get stuck with a smaller tariff. So these are very high stakes, and but the reality is we've got to do everything we can here to get the kind of deal that we need. And I'm glad that we didn't sign a banned deal. I'm glad that we did not do what Japan and the EU did and rush to get, something to kind of what folks were saying to alleviate uncertainty. Because I think what became clear 24 hours after those deals were signed is that uncertainty was not relieved. In fact, no one really understands what was agreed to and what wasn't agreed to. So really the uncertainty continues. So if you're going to have uncertainty, you might as well use that time to create the pressure that you need to get the deal that you need.
Right. And just two more before I let you go here. I know you mentioned Brampton earlier, and I just wanted to double check that, when it comes to Stellantis, Brampton's still at a standstill, I assume, and Ford in Oakville, the construction is continuing. Is that still up to date?
That is correct. We have been waiting for a reply from Stellantis, the date that they keep giving us in terms of when we will know what is happening there has changed from April to May to June, and now we're into July, and now we're into August. So, the thing is we continue to say to them very clearly, and yes, they've gone through a lot of internal changes. So there's been a lot going on in Stellantis. That let's leave it at that. But we have been clear, and we're going to continue to be clear, is they've made commitments to Canada, they made commitments to Canadian workers, and they made commitments to our members, and we expect those commitments to be made. For sure, they're probably waiting until the dust settles on these tariffs. Who knows what is driving things now? But obviously, they took a big hit as a result of the tariffs, and they have actually slowed down production in a number of their facilities. So it's concerning for sure. But we have to keep fighting for that plant. Our members need us to do everything possible to keep Stellantis' feet to the fire and do as they've said, which is to build cars there.
Yeah.
And when it comes to Ford Motor Company, they are still full steam ahead, as you mentioned, with the retool at Oakville, and things are going well there. But all of that means we have to continue to push, because all of these plants, the ones where we represent members and the ones where we don't, including Honda and Toyota, they are all feeling it right now.
Yeah. And
we're fighting for the industry. We're fighting for the 500,000 Canadians who depend on this industry, whether they work directly in it, whether they work in the supply chain, or they're in spin-off jobs from it. It's 500,000 workers, and we can't afford to lose that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just one final one. You mentioned obviously that retaliation needs to be on the table. And, I obviously saw Ford's comments yesterday as well, or sorry, Doug Ford's comments yesterday, not the company. But when it comes to negotiating with somebody like Donald Trump, I mean, you can kind of see him go from 0 to 100, in no time at all. How do you retaliate when, the repercussions could be immediate and potentially catastrophic?
Well, I mean, the reverse is true too. That the leverage that we have could also cause a lot of catastrophic things to occur in the United States. If we were to stop tomorrow sending any aluminum, can you imagine what problems there would be created as a result of that? If we stockpiled aluminum, if we stockpiled, other critical minerals, copper. I mean, I think they tipped their hand this week in terms of what happened on copper. There are lots of ways that we too can create pressure points, and that drives stock markets crazy, and that creates another response. So it's always a risk, but honestly, you either play the cards you have or you fold. And I don't think anyone in Canada wants to be folding right now. We've come this far. We have sustained a lot. We have fought back hard. And I believe we're in a better position right now than we were 3 weeks ago.
You can hear Unifor President Lana Payne's full conversation with David Kennedy on the latest episode of the Automotive News Canada podcast. That's available now wherever you get your podcast. That's Daily Drive for today. I'm Kellen Walker. Thanks to Automotive News executive producer Jake Neer, as well as our own Michael Martinez for his reporting for today's podcast. You can get the latest news on trade negotiations, manufacturing, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com. Come back tomorrow for a conversation with Gabe Klein, who led the U.S. Joint Office of Energy and Transportation under President Joe Biden.
You just want stability so that you know what you can build. If something's promised to you, whether that be funding or establishing a policy or credits, all of that is being changed.
We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. And if you enjoy the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.